So up next is Lari Shea, and she's going to be talking about equestrian trails.
With equestrian trails, there's not a lot to talk about in terms of designated or official trails. So I'm actually not going to get down to the nitty-gritty to tell you exactly where you can access all the, I like the word unofficial trails. Those of us that ride around here are so lucky to have Jackson State Forest with over 45,000 acres of old logging roads and trails that are available to horses. However, nothing's designated specifically as being an equestrian trail in Jackson State Forest at this time. In McCarraker State Park, we do have an equestrian trail, and in Russian Gulch, a short equestrian trail. Our hope and goal, of course, is someday to have a whole network where you could ride the length of the coast, or you could ride from Mendocino to Fort Bragg to Willits on designated horse trails. The old Sherwood Trail, some of you may remember, was actually designated for horses, and that was 30 years ago, I think it was, that we put that together. But there's some private property owners along that trail now who have kind of shut that off. So hopefully someday we'll be able to stand up here and tell you that you could get on your horse and legally and officially ride from all through the county. But rather than do that right now, I want to say a little bit about the different types of people who do take horses out and ride the trails and why. Of course, the first reason, of course, the unifying reason is just the love of the outdoors. Want to get out there in nature and see as much of it as we can. And getting on the back of a horse allows you to go further and faster than I can do on my own 2 feet, I can tell you that. And then, of course, there's also just some people get out there for the sport of it. There's long-distance trail competitions, designated. There's 2 different types of competitions. One is a real race, an endurance race, and we've had them in Jackson State Forest and on private properties over the years. Going to do that again next year. But I think the main reason people do it is just purely for recreation. And you might wonder, who all can ride? Can you ride? You know, could kids ride? Could your parents ride? I didn't have a stroller for my kids when they were little. I put them on the back of a pony and we'd go over to the neighbors on overnight camping trips. Again, so I wouldn't have to put my kids in a backpack. They were on the back of a pony. A few years ago, a woman named Connie Reeves came out here to ride when she was 97 years old. And she was going to ride for a whole week. She brought with her 9 of her friends ranging in age from 46 to 72. And I thought, well, Connie will get on a horse and have her picture taken and then probably be in a rocking chair for the rest of the week. But nope, she rode every day, all day, walking, trotting, and cantering. I had her on a lovely little Arabian mare, very nice and gentle. At the end of the second day, Connie said, "Glory's a sweet little Arabian mare. I'm used to something with a little more spirit." So we put her on a horse that was more her style. We've had many other people who you wouldn't ordinarily think of being riders be able to enjoy our trails on the back of a horse. Folks from the Paul Bunyan Center have come riding both in the woods and on the beach. A few different people that have had multiple sclerosis or cerebral palsy have come and ridden horses where the horses are literally their legs. Wheelchairs, of course, can get you places, but when there's a little bit of a ditch or a fallen log across the trail, that wheelchair is pretty much stuck, and a horse just steps right over it. So a horse has given many people the mobility that they couldn't even dream about before. A woman came from England once to ride with us who told me that she was visually impaired. Well, so am I, you know, contact lenses and everything, but she got out of her car with a white cane. She was 100% blind, and she was put on a very savvy trail horse. We all were riding together again for about a week, and people kept saying, "Sheila, there's a branch ahead, duck to the left, duck to the right." And she was ducking this way and that way, and in ducking, she was kind of goosing the horse that was going sideways, and she could feel the branches, and finally I just said, "You guys, shut up. That horse isn't going to run her into a tree. He knows what he's doing." And she was a very good rider. And she trusted the horse, and of course he doesn't want to run into a tree either. And so she eventually was walking, trotting, and cantering through Jackson State Forest and through McCarraker State Park and on other private properties that were open to us to ride. A woman came up here once who, she was a physician herself, and she was in line for a heart-lung transplant. When she got to the point where she couldn't walk across her own office, she was confined to a wheelchair, she decided she was going to learn to ride a horse. And she was from the San Francisco area, and luckily she hooked up with an instructor who was an Olympic rider from Argentina. And he was a good teacher, and she was a good student. And within 3 or 4 months, she was walking and trotting on her horse, and she and her husband and another couple came up here, wanted to ride for 3 days. And we had to strap an oxygen bottle on the side of the horse because she couldn't go for more than about 15 or 20 minutes without second oxygen. And we did this, we're riding along the beach, and we would stop every now and then, and she'd, get her breath back. And then I said, if you can walk and trot, you can canter. It's so much easier than trotting. Trotting's that bouncy gait. And so we did. And with a nice loping canter, she was able to go all the way to 10 Mile River and north from there. It was truly amazing. And it kind of gave me confidence when I got a call from the Make-A-Wish Foundation. They had a little girl named Megan who was 12 years old, and her dream was to gallop a horse on the beach. Now, she'd never been on a horse. All these other people had ridden in the past, and some of them were quite frequently at that time. But Megan had never been on a horse, and neither had her 13-year-old sister, her 18-year-old brother, or her parents. But the Make-A-Wish Foundation sent the whole family here to ride for a week. And 13-year-old sister happened to fall on the soccer field and break her arm the day before, so she came with her arm in a cast. And I took Megan, put her on a wonderful Arabian gelding named Faraj, and I led Faraj on my horse. Megan has cystic fibrosis, and she's also deaf because of the ravages of the antibiotics that she had to take. And I'm a pretty good riding instructor, but I didn't know how I was going to communicate with her. I couldn't exactly use flashcards on the, while we're riding. So I got on the local radio station and kind of made a fool of myself by asking if anybody around here spoke American Sign Language. But luckily people knew what I meant, and 3 different people volunteered, 2 of whom were riders themselves. And so the first day riding in McCarricker, I was leading Megan's horse, and our interpreter was telling her, basically the rudiments as I was explaining to people how to get them to go, to stop, to turn right, and turn left. And the next day we went out to Jackson State Forest, and by half the day was over, I decided I could turn her loose. And horses do pretty much follow one another. The term we use is they're gregarious. They're herd animals. They like to stick together. But Megan did learn to really control the horse herself. Another couple days went by, and on Thursday, it's the day that we were going to be cantering on the beach. And so I put Megan back on the lead line again. Didn't make her happy. And we practiced cantering once or twice, and her horse wasn't happy being held by me on my horse. My horse wasn't so happy having her horse right next to him. But we cantered and then halted, cantered and halted, and I said to Megan, we didn't have an interpreter that day, when I say ho, you pull back on the reins and you make him stop. She said she would, she understood. So tried it a couple times with me holding onto the rope. I let her loose and we took off cantering, and her horse got a stride or 2 in front of my horse, which meant she couldn't see my raised hand saying ho. But she looked good. She looked happy. She had a smile from ear to ear. And Faraj was just cantering on with his head just a half a neck in front of my horse, in that lead position that horses love to be in. And when I decided maybe we should slow it down now, I said, ho, and Faraj went canter, canter, walk, walk, halt, and turned around and looked at me and said, I got it under control, Larry. Horses do, learn the meaning of a few words, but they also, they pick up on the communication with their rider. And Faraj clearly knew that he was going to give Megan, the rider, her life, which he did. Are there any questions about equestrian trails? Yes?
Up until recently, I was quite active with carriage drivers, and I belonged to a group that was in Northern California. And there really aren't much in the way of trails here where there's access. And do you know of any plans to look at the feasibility of
I do not. I know back east, my husband used to drive his horse. In Pennsylvania, there were wide dirt roads, and they were straighter than a lot of our roads are around here. People are also kind of used to seeing, the Amish have their horses and carriages back there. It takes a wider trail for a carriage, of course, than riding a horse can be on a very narrow
Yeah,
trail.
a lot of times the access is blocked by the bar, gates. And so you can get horseback there, but you can't get a carriage.
Yes, a couple times earlier today, a couple different people came up and said that they either like to drive or would like to learn to drive. And I don't personally know of anybody around here right now. There's other horse people in the room. Does anybody know of anybody that's driving around here or where they're doing it?
Would be an ideal spot, but you have to do it in
Uh-huh.
Like to imagine that, down in Camp One in the summer when Jackson Forest is open, like 360 and, some of those roads, 380 going up to 1,000 maybe, it's like 500, might be 300 all the way out towards that Bell Camp, where there's actually horse camp, they might actually be viable.
Yeah, particularly the ones that stay along the bottom, 300 and 350 and 360 for a while. Those of you that are interested in carriage ought to, kind of get together and plot out those maps. That's what we've been doing with the cyclists, hikers, and horseback riders. It's been wonderful. Various people that use the trails in different ways are getting together, and we're sharing our secrets, where we ride, where we bike, and, putting it together. Any other questions?
If someone wants to come to town and go horseback riding, who can they contact?
Good. What? I don't even know this guy. 964 pony, exactly, and it's horse-vacation.com.